Chapter 17. Moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom, Let me now choose out 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue after David this night, and I will come on him while he is weary and weak-handed, and will make him afraid, and all the people who are with him shall flee, and I will strike the king only, and I will bring back all the people to you. The man whom you seek is as if all returned, so all the people shall be in peace. The saying pleased Absalom well, and all the elders of Israel. Then Absalom said, Call now Hushai the Archite also, and let us hear likewise what he says. When Hushai was come to Absalom, Absalom spoke to him, saying, Ahithophel has spoken after this manner. Shall we do after his saying? If not, speak up. Hushai said to Absalom, The counsel that Ahithophel has given this time is not good. Hushai said moreover, You know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are fierce in their minds, as a bear robbed of her cubs in the field, and your father is a man of war, and will not lodge with the people. Behold, he is hid now in some pit, or in some other place, and it will happen, when some of them are fallen at the first, that whoever hears it will say, There is a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. Even he who is valiant, whose heart is as the heart of a lion, will utterly melt. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are valiant men. But I counsel that all Israel be gathered together to you, from Dan even to Beersheba, as the sand that is by the sea for multitude, and that you go to battle in your own person. So shall we come on him in some place where he shall be found, and we will light on him as the dew falls on the ground, and of him and all the men who are with him we will not leave so much as one. Moreover, if he be gotten into a city, then shall all Israel bring ropes to that city, and we will draw it into the river, until there not be found one small stone. Absalom and all the men of Israel said, The counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel. For the Lord had ordained to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel, to the intent that the Lord might bring evil on Absalom. Then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar the priest, Thus and thus did Ahithophel counsel Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus have I counseled. Now therefore send quickly and tell David, saying, Don't lodge this night at the fords of the wilderness, but by all means pass over, lest the king be swallowed up, and all the people who are with him. Now Jonathan and Ahimaaz were staying by En Rogel, and a maidservant used to go and tell them. And they went and told the king David, for they might not be seen coming into the city. But a boy saw them and told Absalom, and they went both of them away quickly, and came to the house of a man in Bahurim, who had a well in his court, and they went down there. The woman took and spread the covering over the well's mouth, and strewed bruised grain thereon, and nothing was known. Absalom's servants came to the woman to the house, and they said, Where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan? The woman said to them, They have gone over the brook of water. When they had sought and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. It happened, after they had departed, that they came up out of the well, and went and told King David. And they said to David, Arise and pass quickly over the water, for thus has Ahithophel counseled against you. Then David arose, and all the people who were with him, and they passed over the Jordan. By the morning light there lacked not one of them who had not gone over the Jordan. When Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his donkey and arose, and went home to his city, and set his house in order, and hanged himself, and he died and was buried in the tomb of his father. Then David came to Mahanaim. Absalom passed over the Jordan, he and all the men of Israel with him. Absalom set Amasa over the host instead of Joab. Now Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Ithra the Israelite, who went in to Abigail the daughter of Nahash, sister to Zeruiah, Joab's mother. Israel and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. It happened, when David was come to Mahanaim, that Shobi, the son of Nahash of Rabbah, of the children of Ammon, and Machir, the son of Amiel of Lodabar, and Barzillai the Gileadite of Rogelim, brought beds and basins, and earthen vessels, and wheat and barley and meal, and parched grain, and beans and lentils and parched pulse, and honey, and butter and sheep, and cheese of the herd for David, and for the people who were with him to eat, for they said, The people are hungry, and weary, and thirsty in the wilderness.
Chapter 18. David numbered the people who were with him, and set captains of thousands and captains of hundreds over them. David sent the people out, a third part under the hand of Joab, and a third part under the hand of Abishai the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and a third part under the hand of Ittai the Gittite. The king said to the people, I will go out with you myself also. But the people said, You will not go out with us, for if we flee away, they will not care for us, neither if half of us die. But you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore now it is better that you are ready to help us out of the city. The king said to them, I will do what seems best to you. The king stood by the gate, and all the people went out by hundreds and by thousands. The king commanded Joab and Abishai and Ittai, saying, Deal gently for my sake with the young man, even with Absalom. All the people heard when the king gave all the captains charge concerning Absalom. So the people went out into the field against Israel, and the battle was in the forest of Ephraim. The people of Israel were struck there before the servants of David, and there was a great slaughter there that day of 20,000 men. For the battle was spread over the surface of the countryside, and the forest devoured more people that day than the sword. Absalom happened to meet the servants of David. Absalom was riding on his mule, and the mule went under the thick boughs of a great oak, and his head caught hold of the oak, and he was lifted up between the sky and the earth, and the mule that was under him went on. A certain man saw it and told Joab and said, Look, I saw Absalom hanging in an oak. Joab said to the man who told him, Behold, you saw it, and why didn't you strike him there to the ground, and I would have given you 10 pieces of silver and a sash. The man said to Joab, Though I should receive 1,000 pieces of silver in my hand, I still wouldn't put forth my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king charged you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, Beware that none touch the young man Absalom. Otherwise, if I had dealt falsely against his life, and there is no matter hid from the king, then you yourself would have set yourself against me. Then Joab said, I cannot wait for you. He took 3 darts in his hand and thrust them through the heart of Absalom, while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. 10 young men who bore Joab's armor surrounded Absalom and struck him and killed him. Joab blew the trumpet, and the people returned from pursuing after Israel, for Joab held the people back. They took Absalom and cast him into the great pit in the forest, and raised over him a very great heap of stones, and all Israel fled every one to his tent. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and reared up for himself the pillar which is in the king's dale, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in memory. And he called the pillar after his own name, and it is called Absalom's monument to this day. Then said Ahimaaz the son of Zadok, Let me now run and bear the king news, how that the Lord has avenged him of his enemies. Joab said to him, You shall not be the bearer of news this day, but you shall bear news another day. But this day you shall bear no news, because the king's son is dead. Then Joab said to the Cushite, Go tell the king what you have seen. The Cushite bowed himself to Joab and ran. Then Ahimaaz the son of Zadok spoke yet again to Joab, Come what may, please let me also run after the Cushite. Joab said, Why will you run, my son, seeing that you have no reward for the news? But come what may, I will run, he said. Joab said to him, Run. Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain, and outran the Cushite. Now David was sitting between the 2 gates, and the watchman went up to the roof of the gate to the wall, and lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man running alone. The watchman cried and told the king. The king said, If he is alone, then there is news in his mouth. He came and drew near. The watchman saw another man running, and the watchman called to the porter and said, Look, another man running alone. The king said, He also brings news. The watchman said, I think the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz the son of Zadok. The king said, He is a good man, and comes with good news. Ahimaaz called and said to the king, All is well. He bowed himself before the king with his face to the earth and said, Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who lifted up their hand against my lord the king. The king said, Is it well with the young man Absalom? Ahimaaz answered, When Joab sent the king's servant, I saw a great tumult, but I don't know what it was. The king said, Come and stand here. He came and stood still. Behold, the Cushite came, and the Cushite said, News for my lord the king, for the Lord has avenged you this day of all those who rose up against you. The king said to the Cushite, Is it well with the young man Absalom? The Cushite answered, The enemies of my lord the king, and all who rise up against you to do you hurt, be as that young man is. The king was much moved, and went up to the chamber over the gate, and wept, and as he went he said, My son Absalom, my son Absalom, would that I had died for you, Absalom my son. Chapter 19. It was told Joab, Behold, the king weeps and mourns for Absalom. The victory that day was turned into mourning to all the people, for the people heard say that day, The king grieves for his son. The people came by stealth that day into the city, as the people who are ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. The king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, My son Absalom, Absalom, my son. Joab came into the house of the king and said, You have shamed this day the faces of all your servants, who this day have saved your life, and the lives of your sons and of your daughters, and of your wives and of your concubines, and that you love those who hate you, and hate those who love you. For you have declared this day that princes and servants are nothing to you. For this day I perceive that if Absalom had lived, and we all had died this day, it had pleased you well. Now therefore arise, go out and speak to your servants, for I swear by the Lord, if you don't go out, there will not stay a man with you this night, and that will be worse to you than all the evil that has happened to you from your youth until now. Then the king arose and sat in the gate. They told all the people, saying, Behold, the king is sitting in the gate. And all the people came before the king. Now Israel had fled every man to his tent. All the people were at strife throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, The king delivered us out of the hand of our enemies, and he saved us out of the hand of the Philistines, and now he is fled out of the land from Absalom. Absalom, whom we anointed over us, is dead in battle. Now therefore why don't you speak a word of bringing the king back? King David sent to Zadok and to Abiathar the priest, saying, Speak to the elders of Judah, saying, Why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, seeing the speech of all Israel is come to the king to bring him to his house? You are my brothers, you are my bone and my flesh. Why then are you the last to bring back the king? Say to Amasa, Aren't you my bone and my flesh? God do so to me, and more also, if you aren't captain of the host before me continually in the room of Joab. He bowed the heart of all the men of Judah, even as the heart of one man, so that they sent to the king, saying, Return, and all of your servants with you. So the king returned, and came to the Jordan. Judah came to Gilgal, to go meet the king, to bring the king over the Jordan. Shimei the son of Gera the Benjamite, who was of Bahurim, hurried and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. There were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, and Ziba the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons, and his 20 servants with him, and they went through the Jordan in the presence of the king. There went over a ferry boat to bring over the king's household, and to do what he thought good. Shimei the son of Gera fell down before the king when he was come over the Jordan. He said to the king, Don't let my lord impute iniquity to me. Neither remember that which your servant did perversely the day that my lord the king went out of Jerusalem, that the king should take it to his heart. for your servant does know that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I am come this day, the first of all the house of Joseph, to go down to meet my lord the king. But Abishai the son of Zeruiah said, Shall Shimei not be put to death for this? Because he cursed the Lord's anointed. David said, What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should this day be adversaries to me? Shall there be any man put to death this day in Israel? For don't I know that I am once again king this day over Israel? The king said to Shimei, You shall not die. The king swore to him. Mephibosheth the son of Saul came down to meet the king, and he had neither dressed his feet, nor trimmed his beard, nor washed his clothes, from the day the king departed until the day he came home in peace. It happened, when he was come to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said to him, Why didn't you go with me, Mephibosheth? He answered, My lord, O king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said, I will saddle a donkey, that I may ride thereon and go with the king, because your servant is lame. He has slandered your servant to my lord the king. But my lord the king is as an angel of God. Do therefore what is good in your eyes. For all my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king. Yet you set your servant among those who ate at your own table. What right therefore have I yet that I should cry any more to the king? The king said to him, Why speak any more of your matters? I say, You and Ziba divide the land. Mephibosheth said to the king, Yes, let him take all, because my lord the king is come in peace to his own house. Barzillai the Gileadite came down from Rogelim, and he went over the Jordan with the king, to conduct him over the Jordan. Now Barzillai was a very aged man, even 80 years old, and he had provided the king with sustenance while he lay at Mahanaim, for he was a very great man. The king said to Barzillai, Come over with me, and I will sustain you with me in Jerusalem. Barzillai said to the king, How many are the days of the years of my life, that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? I am this day 80 years old. Can I discern between the good and the bad? Can your servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any more the voice of singing men and singing women? Why then should your servant be yet a burden to my lord the king? Your servant would but just go over the Jordan with the king. And why should the king recompense it me with such a great reward? Please let your servant turn back again, that I may die in my own city, by the grave of my father and my mother. But behold, your servant Chimham, let him go over with my lord the king, and do to him what shall seem good to you. The king answered, Chimham shall go over with me, and I will do to him that which shall seem good to you, and whatever you shall require of me, that I will do for you. All the people went over the Jordan, and the king went over, and the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his own place. So the king went over to Gilgal, and Chimham went over with him, and all the people of Judah brought the king over, and also half the people of Israel. Behold, all the men of Israel came to the king and said to the king, Why have our brothers, the men of Judah, stolen you away, and brought the king and his household over the Jordan, and all David's men with him? All the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, Because the king is a close relative to us. Why then are you angry about this matter? Have we eaten at all at the king's cost, or has he given us any gift? The men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, We have 10 parts in the king, and we also have more right in David than you. Why then did you despise us, that our advice should not be first had in bringing back our king? The words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel.
Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went early while it was still dark to the tomb, and saw the stone taken away from the tomb. Therefore she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and said to them, They have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have laid him. Therefore Peter and the other disciple went out, and they went toward the tomb. They both ran together. The other disciple outran Peter and came to the tomb first. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths lying, yet he didn't enter in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and entered into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying, and the cloth that had been on his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but rolled up in a place by itself. So then the other disciple who came first to the tomb also entered in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they didn't know the scripture, that he must rise from the dead. So the disciples went away again to their own homes. But Mary was standing outside at the tomb weeping. So as she wept, she stooped and looked into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. They told her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, and didn't know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Who are you looking for?" She, supposing him to be the gardener, said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him, "Rabboni," which is to say, "Teacher." Jesus said to her, "Don't touch me, for I haven't yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord, and that he had said these things to her. When therefore it was evening, on that day, the first day of the week, and when the doors were locked where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood in the midst, and said to them, "Peace be to you." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples therefore were glad when they saw the Lord. Jesus therefore said to them again, "Peace be to you. As the Father has sent me, even so I send you." When he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. Whoever sins you forgive, they are forgiven them. Whoever sins you retain, they have been retained." But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, wasn't with them when Jesus came. The other disciples therefore said to him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." After 8 days again his disciples were inside, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, the doors being locked, and stood in the midst and said, "Peace be to you." Then he said to Thomas, "Reach here your finger and see my hands. Reach here your hand and put it into my side. Don't be unbelieving, but believing." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed." Therefore Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written, that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. Psalm 124. If it had not been Yahweh who was on our side, let Israel now say, if it had not been Yahweh who was on our side when men rose up against us, then they would have swallowed us up alive when their wrath was kindled against us. Then the waters would have overwhelmed us, the stream would have gone over our soul. Then the proud waters would have gone over our soul. Blessed be Yahweh, who has not given us as a prey to their teeth. Our soul has escaped like a bird out of the fowler's snare. The snare is broken, and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of Yahweh, who made heaven and earth. It is an abomination for kings to do wrong, for the throne is established by righteousness. Righteous lips are the delight of kings. They value one who speaks truth. The king's wrath is a messenger of death, but a wise man will pacify it. In the light of the king's face is life. His favor is like a cloud of the spring rain.